Today on the Wounded Angel Network, I want to speak about another one of the F words. We have already discussed the big F word that trips up many of us who are wounded angels trying to fly again, and that is the word failure. But today, the F word that I would like us to reflect on is the word forgiveness. Now, if you've grown up in any kind of Christian environment, you'll be forgiven for thinking that forgiveness is actually regarded as quite an easy, cheap thing. Forgive and forget, they say. Well, I'm pretty sure you can't do the last one because forgetting of painful experiences, hurts that have been inflicted on you by somebody else, are virtually impossible to forget. In the same way that scars may always be with us. The pain of the actual wound may not be there anymore, but the scar will always remain to be a reminder. So forgetting is virtually impossible. Forgiving, in the forgiving and forgetting, forgiving is possible, but not as easy as people make it sound. Forgiveness is a process. And I remember many years ago a friend telling me how on the morning after he had phoned the pastor to report that his daughter, his teenage daughter, had been raped the previous night, the pastor arrived at the home, asked to see the traumatized girl. And the first thing he told her was that she had to forgive the rapist, her rapist. My friend who was telling me the story was a very peaceable man. But he says at that point he almost punched the pastor. And I honestly can't blame him. Forgiveness, if it comes at all, comes at the end of a process which I have broken down into 4 steps. These for me are the steps that I try to help people who have been hurt to go through, and the 4th step of the process is forgiveness. So the 4 steps are: first you hurt, then you hate. Yes, hate. It is a 4-letter word, I know, but you hate. Then you heal yourself. And then maybe you forgive. Even if in the forgiving you never want to see the person who hurt you ever again. So let's start at the beginning. First you hurt. My problem with people who say, oh, you must forgive and forget, like the pastor to the girl who was raped, is that it is a form of denial of the trauma that has actually been suffered. One of the unfortunate things I have to tell you about working as I do in South Africa that is crime-riddled is that I often have to do post-traumatic stress debriefings of people who have been exposed to the trauma of hijackings or muggings or even witnessing violent crimes like murders. And one of the processes, we're not quite sure in the professions how it works, like so much of what we do, but we do know that in the treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, a very useful therapy is for the person to tell the story in as much detail as possible. So So if you came to see me having suffered a significant trauma, I would ask you to slow the traumatic moment down. And that's usually quite easy because our brains run into overdrive like high-speed cameras because of all the adrenaline, and we tend to remember the traumatic event in slow motion anyway. But as part of the therapy, I will ask you to slow the whole traumatic event right down to almost frame by frame. And then we will go through the process using each of the senses. So in terms of the hurting, the acknowledging of the hurt, when we're thinking about the process leading towards forgiveness, we begin by saying, remember what you saw. Slice by slice by slice. What did you see? Then we come back, what did you hear? And the person tells you the story moment by moment, slice by slice. What did you see? What did you hear? What did you smell? Are there any smells that you recall? Were there any tastes? Can you remember tactile sensations? And so employing all the senses, we go over the hurt again and again and again. And this does not lead to embitterment, as so many people think. Oh, don't think about it, avoid it. Particularly in our English culture, we find it very easy to, stiff upper lip, old man. It's not helpful. Feel the hurt. Relive it. This event that you are grappling with, that you're trying to see if perhaps you can forgive what this other person did to you, feel the hurt. Allow it to be in the sense of dealing with a trauma, because the hurt that has been caused you, that has damaged you, that has wounded you, that has perhaps been the event that caused you as an angel to be wounded and to fall. As you process that, feel the hurt. So that's step number one. First, we all hurt. We don't deny the hurt, we acknowledge the hurt, we feel it in all of the senses. And if you don't have somebody to speak to, like a therapist in this situation, then you can always journal. And may I remind you that at the end of every episode of the Wounded Angel Network videos, there is a email address where I invite you to contact me if you would like to set up one-on-one Skype or Zoom sessions, which are available. So we can do this process in a Skype session, or with a friend, just somebody who will listen as you go through the hurt. So either writing it into a journal, speaking with a friend, speaking with me, speaking with another therapist. Feel the hurt. First we hurt. The second step, then we hate. Of course, for those of us who really believe we should be peaceable people, and the word hate is a strong word. It's a word that we're awkward about. Am I allowed to hate? Yes, I think you are, because hate is a visceral, real response to having been hurt, to having been wounded, to having been damaged. Feel the hate. Feel how it feels to literally hate the person that did this to you. And I'm not talking about glossing over, what do we say, hate the sin but love the sinner. No. Hate the person that did it. Feel the absolute anger that is quite justified. Allow that emotion of hate to surface. There's a verse in Ephesians. Paul writes a letter to the Ephesians, and he says in there, he says, be angry but do not sin. And hate is a form of anger. So So you don't have to act out the hate. You don't have to now go and inflict a counter hurt on the person who hurt you or who wounded you. You don't have to go and wound them, because then, as Martin Luther King Jr. said, if we live by an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, then we all just end up blind and toothless. So you don't act out on the hate, but you allow it to be there. You allow yourself to feel what it is to feel absolute hatred for the person who has done this to you. First you hurt, then you hate. And of course, I can't give you a time frame for how long you do this. This is not for the first week you will do this, and then the second. It doesn't work like that. But you will know when you are done feeling the hurt. You will know when you are done hating the person that did this to you. And those first two steps are steps that then bring us to the place where we are ready, and are in fact part of the process whereby we come to stage 3, where we heal ourselves. Just as we allow ourselves to feel the hurt, so we allow ourselves to feel the hate, and then we begin to allow ourselves the possibility of healing. Healing is an organic, natural, and often, as one who is older, is discovering a slower and a slower process as one grows older. But you heal yourself. You allow yourself to be restored. You allow yourself to begin to move on beyond the hurt and the hate. And you begin to affirm that whatever it is that this person did to you does not have to define the rest of your life. You don't always have to be the hurt or the hating person. You feel the hurt, you feel the hate, and then you choose to begin to heal yourself and say, I will not give you the power to constantly be top of my mind as you have been. I will not spend my life obsessing about this thing that you have done to me. We heal ourselves. We allow ourselves to become whole. We hurt, we heal. We hurt, we hate, we heal. The first 3 steps. And as part of that healing, I often encourage and try to measure where people are in their healing from hurt process by inviting them to begin to think of the person who was the agent in the hurt, the person who hurt them, the person who wounded them. I begin to invite them in an attempt to sort of measure if they're getting close to stage 3. I invite them to see if there's any possible, what I call, compassion window into that person's life, the person who hurt them, the person who wounded them. It might have been a parent, it might have been a teacher, it might have been a friend, it might have been a lover. But this person who hurt you, the person who you now hate, who has done this terrible thing to you, is it possible to begin to feel or to open a compassion window into that other person's life? And the compassion window is where you can begin to say, you know what, it must be really crap to be you. It must be terrible to be you. To be a person who could do what you did to me. That's the beginning of the opening of a compassion window. For me, it happened years ago. I had an example of this, the compassion window opening years ago when I first came to the city where I live now, Port Elizabeth, over 30 years ago. Front page when I arrived in town was the story of a psychopathic killer who had been arrested. It was a dreadful story. There were body parts in refrigerators, cut up. It was dark, psychopathic murder, and it was front page, obviously. And I remember reading about this person, this psychopathic killer, and thinking to myself, what a dreadful, there was in me just total aversion to this person. You absolute animal, you disgusting person. Yeah. And as all stories, the news cycle 30 years ago was a little slower than the 24 hours that it probably is now. So the story stayed on the front page for quite a while, and eventually moved onto the back pages. And I remember it was about 6 months later, I was reading the paper, and on page 6, this was now 6 months later, and the trial had begun. And right in the middle of the newspaper was a small little article about the trial. And a social worker was testifying before the court. And this article was about the testimony of the social worker who reported having removed this psychopath from their parental home when they were aged 5, and how the social worker had found this person, this killer, this murderer, at the age of 5, chained up in a dog kennel on a running chain in the backyard of his parents' home. And in that moment that I read that, this terrible psychopath, this murderer, this person who 6 months before I had been utterly revolted by and gone, ah! A compassion window had opened, and I tried to imagine how it must have been for that 5-year-old child to be chained up in the backyard on a running chain, the thing we wouldn't even do to our dog, but had been treated like a dog, a badly treated dog. And the compassion window opened. I couldn't excuse what the adult psychopath had become and done, but there was a compassion window that helped me to realize that we're all products in some way. Even the worst behaved of us, even the most violent of us, have been caused by something. And in this case, it was the terrible abuse by the parents. That's the compassion window. And when you can begin to glimpse a compassion window into the life of the person who has harmed you, where you say, wow, it must be terrible to have been you, or to be you as you are now, that's the beginning of the healing in ourself. Our best self is when we can be compassionate even to the ones who harm and who hurt us. First we hurt, then we hate, then we heal, and as part of the symptom or sign that healing is beginning to happen is we begin to open a little compassion window into that person's life to understand that who they are and what they did is because of how they have been caused to be by the circumstances of their life. And when we've been through those 3 steps, then we can begin to think about the possibility of forgiveness. We'll never forget. We said that right at the beginning. But it's possible that we can begin to think about forgiving. And how do we know when forgiveness is beginning to dawn in us for our abuser, for the perpetrator against us, for our enemy? I believe the sign of forgiveness beginning to take hold and to root in us is when we can wish that person well and not harm. When we can say to the person, I will always have the scars. This is from where I cut myself very badly a few weeks ago. I will always have a scar to remind me of the cut and the hurt. I've looked into your life through my little compassion window. I don't wish you harm. I may never ever want to see you again. I may have to protect myself, never ever to be around you again. But I'm beginning to taste the possibility of forgiveness, because forgiveness is when I say to you, go in peace. I wish you well, I don't wish you harm, even if I cannot ever be close to you again. That's forgiveness. It doesn't mean we have to go and hug the person. And as a conflict mediator, I'm always very suspicious of conflict resolution processes where in a very short space of time people are saying, well, now we have to just reach over the table and shake each other's hands, or let's give each other a hug, or let's have a prayer together, or sing a hymn together, or do something silly. I call that Band-Aid conflict resolution. It just sticks a plaster over the sore, and underneath it festers. So this forgive and forget, this quick, fix it, make it go away, this doesn't help anybody. Don't remain a victim forever. Don't get stuck in hurting and hating. That's another dynamic altogether. When you get stuck in hurt and hate for the rest of your life, then you become a victim, and we'll be saying more in these sessions about the victim in the narrative of our lives, the story of our lives. But for now, speaking about forgiveness, forgiveness is a difficult process, and it comes in 4 stages. First you hurt, then you hate, and you heal and begin to have some compassion for the person who hurt you, and then you forgive them, even if it means that you never want to see them again. So if you're experiencing deep pain, deep hurt, if you're a wounded angel who has been pulled or thrown down to the ground by the actions of someone else or a group of people towards you, I invite you to consider these steps, this process of forgiveness, not the single quick fix, Band-Aid, forgive and forget, but a slow therapeutic process of hurting and hating and healing yourself till eventually you can let that person go and be free, and you can be free to decide whether you ever want to see them or have them in your life again. Thank you for your attention, and thank you for listening to another reflection from the Wounded Angel Network, helping wounded angels learn to fly.